when you're a host at a conference, your job is to do transitions. And sometimes you just want to avoid the transition and introduce the next speaker because you believe you don't need to. So, except perhaps one thing, it's also the title and what we've been talking about around data. So we'll talk now around the power of data and why data is key for the future of the IoT and why data is actually what we need when we engage into an IoT project. And so to have this conversation, we have a partner at PwC who's going to be joining us with our president at Sigfox for North America in a conversation called The Future of Data is the Future of Everything. But when we were discussing it backstage, we'll change the title into Turning Data into Action. This is actually more, perhaps, interesting. So please help me welcome Alain Protais and Rob Misero. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So thanks again to Rob Mesero for joining us this afternoon to have a chat about the future of data is the future of everything. And I think it's a very relevant topic because we call it the Internet of Things, but why do we care about things? It's only because they give data. And data is where the magic of IoT is. So Rob, thanks again. And I know we have a limited time today. So I want to start out with a really basic question. Because PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, is one of the biggest systems integrators in the world, almost 250,000 people. Many of us have worked with systems integrators, but some of us may have not had that experience. And maybe you could start just by sharing, what is a systems integrator? Really, what is the core function of PwC, and why do you care about IoT?
So, hello, that's pretty loud. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alan, for having me. If you haven't worked with a systems integrator, I would highly recommend it, and here's why. Systems integrators essentially come in and help with the strategy component and then delivery and the revenue push forward. Thank you. That's really annoying. So from the PwC's approach to the market is we wanted to come in and solve a couple of problems. One of the problems we saw immediately in the IoT space, as everybody's talking about billions and billions of connected devices that haven't really materialized, was their strategy component. So we're getting called to do a lot of strategy work around IoT, and people wanted to figure out, okay, how do I connect devices to help me run my business better, more efficiently, and maybe make money. And the other side of that was people were trying to figure out the monetization around it and the data piece of it. And the people we were talking to really wanted to aggregate a lot of different data. So it wasn't just, hey, I want to monitor my tank level and then see what that is. Mm-hmm. They wanted the whole picture. And that's what the systems integration will do for you. It allows you to go from strategy through execution.
I think it's a great way to look at it. And one of the things I say, first of all, IoT doesn't really exist. It's a wrapper we put around a collection of thousands and thousands of different use cases. But let's say you want to buy IoT. The question is, who do you call? You call a chip guy, a module guy, device guy, connectivity person, hopefully, somewhere in the software stack. And I think PwC is the perfect partner because they're the people that have the breadth to pull all those pieces together for you. So speaking of pieces, you've been very passionate about the concept of data is the future. So how does LPWAN and specifically Sigfox fit in that? Because we've had a lot of different types of long-range and short-range connectivity for quite a while. We've all been very familiar with. But how does this fit into the bigger picture for you?
So for us, and our pyramid slide really shows this, I think, pretty well. We felt we wanted to start from the beginning. So we want to start with that foundational layer of IoT. And you can see this with the LPWAN next to it, because to get to those billions of connected devices, we really needed to change the economics. And for us, LPWAN does that. And we like to say we want to make dumb things smart, very simply. And then we want to start collecting all of these small bits of data and aggregate them into data hubs. And then they start to tell a story. one data stream tells one story. Multiple data streams start telling a really interesting picture of your enterprise and how you build it. And then what we envision is moving up the stack over the next 5 years. And LP-WAN is really going to be a thread that runs all the way up this stack. But through every evolution, till we get up to what we refer to as smart everything. Some people think about that as smart cities. That's how we'll continue to monetize and bring our customers along all the way up through the evolution of IoT.
Well, you make a good point in that, a Sigfox technology gives you access to all these, connecting the analog with the digital with things that never had a voice before. But there's already a massive amount of data that enterprises have. And you see some public information about 90% of all data that corporations already have, they don't even touch sometimes. And it's this new data, I think, that's going to be a tipping point of value for companies. So when you work with customers, maybe you can give us an example of how have you seen some of this new IoT type data impacting a customer in some way?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We hear that a lot. What you stated about we have all this data, but we're afraid to touch it.
Exactly.
We hear that all the time, and it's really interesting because we see data as being very powerful. If you think about it, the wealthiest, most powerful companies on the planet treat data like cash, and that's what we want our clients to do. So as we think through their issues with them and how they can start to bring that data out, you see this red bar to the right of our triangle where we think about privacy, security, regulatory risk. That's one of the benefits of working with a systems integrator is that you've got this depth of knowledge and understanding, so you know from a regulatory standpoint if you're going to be protected. Because a lot of people are afraid of the data is because of the privacy concerns. They don't want to be sued. They don't want to be compromised. And how does that work? So the data is powerful. The data is your friend. You just got to make sure you're using it correctly.
Well, the privacy bar, as we know, is much higher in Europe than it is in the U.S. Of course, in the U.S., everyone just puts all their private information on Facebook on a personal basis. But what we're talking about for more short-term opportunities actually are more, I think, industrial than consumer. So I know that depending on the region of the world, you tend to see different types of use cases popping up more than others. Is there a particular set of use cases or industries that you're seeing more or that you think are more appealing in the short term, let's say call it 18 to 24 months?
Yeah. Well, one of our first engagements that drove our partnership, Alan, as you know, was around retail gaming. So slot machines that were spread out all over the island of Puerto Rico, 25,000. And how do you collect the financial data out of those machines is very complex, and it just simply wasn't happening. I never thought that would be scalable, and that's something that a lot of people would want. I did the use case yesterday. Literally 4 people came up to me yesterday and said, "Oh, we live in this place, and we've got all these retail. We got to connect these machines." So I think the answer to your question really is you never know what's going to be the killer app. So we're seeing a lot of interest for retail gaming. We're seeing it actually in large casinos in Las Vegas that want it because the Sigfox network provides a secure environment for those transfers. So that's a powerful message when you look and you see the fraud that's happening across some of these. But other than that, we see asset tracking is really a big request. People want to know. Fleet management is another big one that we've been getting. So.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I think the emphasis may be different in different places, but to me, what drives it sometimes is when you get the cost so low, it creates opportunities that no one ever considered before because you can finally afford to access those opportunities and access that data. So it makes a huge difference. What do you think is the most overlooked data? We talk about data and connecting everything in the physical world to the digital world. We're talking about gaming machines. Later on, we're going to hear a great update on what we're doing with, I was asked at Mobile World Congress in Americas 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, what was the most interesting use case I've seen lately? And I said rhinos. And we're doing a lot of work with our foundation at Sigfox. But what's some of the most interesting things that you've seen that are a little outside the box? Gaming, people love gambling, of course, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
But what else really is a surprise to you to see people collecting data from applications?
Rhinos, quite frankly.
Rhinos,
now that I hear about it, that's pretty interesting. inside the gaming space, we're looking at and being asked to track all kinds of different things. So you think about $1,000 poker chip, that's $1,000 asset. If I can track that for $2 or $5 a year, why wouldn't I track it? So you're right, it comes down to the cost structure. So for $5 a year, if it's worth more than $100, why not track it?
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of those models, but again, it's not just that single lane of data that I think makes it so interesting to these large enterprises. It's the multiple streams of data coming together to tell a really interesting story. And I think that's where, even with 12 bytes of data, you times that by 10,000, then you start to see things. And I'll give you an example. So on the island of Puerto Rico, we're looking at tracking all kinds of things. So if we've got 25,000 gaming machines across the entire island, they're all connected to electricity. So we know when electricity is going out all over the island. By the way, that's the entire island currently, but we know when that happens. We're tracking the people coming onto the island. So we know how many people are coming off of cruise ships onto the island. We're tracking air pollution. We're tracking crime statistics. All this stuff comes together. We're tracking kids on buses. So if 10,000 more people come onto the island, what does that do to the pollution level? If the pollution level gets bad, do less kids get on the school buses? And then you can start using it like a decision engine. And that's the way we think about it.
So how do you help handle that data? Because if you think about it, you're getting sources from all these different sources, the analog world to the digital. It's different formats of data, it's different types of data. Some of it's data in rest, some of it's data in motion. I mean, how do you sort of pull all this together to make sense?
Right, systems integration 101. So I mean, that's really it. You want to be able to pull in a lot of outside data, mix it with your sensory data, and then create this picture of what's happening, in this instance, on the island of Puerto Rico. So we have lots of different ways to ingest the data and make it make sense and put it into one dashboard. And again, that's pretty complex. And I think for one operator or one company that's making one sensor, or maybe even making a group of sensors, that's very difficult to do. Again, that's why partnering with somebody who does the SI backend can be really, really powerful, because that's how we turn data into action.
Well, I think it adds a lot of value, because they say no man is an island. Well, no IoT project remains one for very long either. That you get incremental, massive more value when you interact that one piece of data with many other pieces. And I think as you are able to collect those pieces over time, not to mention the existing, that's where the real synergies start happening with a lot of this data.
Correct. Yeah. Data is more powerful in the presence of more data. So you always want data. I tell my people, all we want to do is get people addicted to the data. Because if they get addicted to the data, that's going to drive the sensory deployments. It's going to drive the build out of the networks. And then they're going to have more information. Then they're just going to want more information. It's going to be this vicious cycle.
That's why the cloud guys are doing so well, right? It's the infinite data pool.
It's the infinite data pool.
You can just dump it in. But you know what the funny thing is? The old-time storage guys are also doing well, because there's certain data people still want to hold on to more locally. And so everyone's winning who touches the data space.
Right. Well, the one thing we know for sure, Alan, is that there'll be more data collected today than yesterday, and tomorrow even more data. So it's accelerating exponentially, and trying to make sense of all of this. When people talk about big data and all that, it's complicated. Even at 12 bits at a time, it all comes together.
Well, I think about it as grains of sand on the beach. If you have 2 or 3 grains of sand, maybe you won't even notice it in your shoe, but you put enough grains together and you have the most beautiful beach you've ever seen.
That's right. And
that's really what Sigfox is trying to enable, is to really paint that beach for people. One thing here, we have a really mixed audience. We have customers here from many, many different verticals. We have all kinds of different people on the hardware side, from modules, chipsets, end devices. We have a variety of partners on the cloud, on the software side. What advice, again, when you're engaging with a customer or with a partner who typically is going to satisfy perhaps one piece of a solution, but not the full solution, what advice do you give people when you're thinking about, this is a project I need to get going? How should they really think about it? How do they approach it? How do they maximize the chance for success?
Yeah, well, it really comes with, you got to start with the end in mind. And you generally, when we go into these engagements, we're trying to solve one problem. So I'll give you another example from Puerto Rico. So they just wanted us to be able to count the people coming off the cruise ships. They had no idea who was coming off the cruise ships. And we said, okay, well, we've got a interesting facial recognition product that will allow you to count the people. They're like, great. Is it accurate? Yeah, it's 100% accurate. Terrific. Let's deploy it. I said, oh, by the way, in addition to that, we can also tell you if they're male or female. We can also tell you their age. We can also tell you their ethnicity. So we can give them this basic, demographic model. And that's a bonus. And I feel every conversation that starts with, we just got to solve this one problem, turns into all of these different solution sets. So it's bolt-on onto bolt-on onto bolt-on, or just a more comprehensive approach to a simple solution that's going to give them more data, more intelligence, and allow them to do more things. So start with the end in mind, solve the initial problem, and then show them how it can be so much more.
I think that's the whole trick. Focus on a very specific problem. And what I've seen too is the more you focus on solving a very specific pain point, the more successful you'll be. You also avoid sort of project bloat, where you almost forget what the purpose was of the original project. And by solving that first one, basically you earn the trust, you earn the right to do many more bigger things.
Right.
Great.
Make dumb things smart.
Exactly. Now we just have to work on us.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's about it for our time today, everyone. But thank you very much for your attention. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.